Do you guys recall about a year ago, there was this TikTok trend going around where women would ask their husbands, boyfriends, guy friends, how often they thought about the Roman Empire? And the answer, surprisingly, was quite a lot. Men think about the Roman Empire quite a lot. 95% of the time, the only thing in their head is the Roman Empire. Now, I have to confess, I don't think about the Roman Empire as often as I should. There was a period in 2007 when I thought about the Roman Empire more than I do now. Whose fault is that? The fault, dear Brutus, is not in the stars. It's in ourselves. If you were to ask me what I think about on a regular basis, the answer would be Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. That's right. I mean, I would say that I think about Victorian Gothic Romance Literature on a regular basis. 95% of my brain, and here's a little bit of girl math for you, that's almost 100% of my brain. 95% of my brain is dedicated to ruminating about Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. I could go about my day as usual. I'm at Target. I'm at the dollar section. I'm looking at some vases, and then bam! Victorian Gothic Romance Literature will just pop into my head. Or the other day, I was nibbling on some chicken wings, okay? I had these chicken wings. They were delicious, by the way. Some Korean chicken wings. And I was just like, Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. And I drop my chicken wing, and then I just stare off into the middle distance, and I have a moment to myself, you know, because this topic is just so all-consuming. When I'm at Costco, especially when I'm at Costco, okay? Costco just brings it out. I don't know what it is. This topic just pops into my head. It could happen at any time, at any aisle. When I'm getting some samples at Costco, you know, the sample lady's handing me a sample of hummus. I'm reaching out for it, and then bam, Victorian Gothic Romance Literature just pops into my head, and I drop my sample, and I have to go and face like the ficus display and just have a moment to myself and think about this. This is like a heavy weight that I need to get off my chest, and I need to do it right here, right now. My name is Teresa, and this is my version of the Roman Empire, Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. And when you're done with this video, maybe you'll start thinking about it too. Here we go. So now that we established that I think about Victorian Gothic Romance Literature all the time, all the livelong day, and it is my version of the Roman Empire, and don't worry, it'll be your Roman Empire as well once you finish this video, the question begs to be asked, does the algorithm think about Victorian Gothic Romance Literature? And I would unfortunately venture to say that the algorithm doesn't give a darn about Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. Chances are there's probably going to be 25 people that watches this video, like 25 people that really get it. We think about it at Costco. It makes us drop our chicken wings. If you are one of those 25 people who has stuck with me through thick and thin, I thank you. I thank you for watching this video, because you and I, we're in this together. We're in a clandestine cloak and dagger society here. We're in, let's just call it a book club. A book club. We're in this tiny little book club. 25 is a little generous. Well, let's just say 10 of you are into Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. The algorithm is not into it. I know it deep in my heart. The algorithm doesn't give a toot about it. You know, just trying to keep it family friendly here. You know, the algorithm needs to get with a program. But in the off chance that you are that one person that just happens to wander in here into this clandestine book club, and you're like, what the hell is everybody talking about? What the hell is this Victorian Gothic Romance Literature? Then allow me, as the president of this book club, to enlighten you. And don't feel bad, because a long time ago, the very first book I ever wrote, the book that I queried and got me a literary agent, that was a Gothic romance novel. When I was querying it, I kept calling it a Gothic romance novel, and a lot of literary agents had no freaking clue what Gothic romance was. That kind of disappointed me a little, because I thought by having the title of literary agent, they would know, you know, the English major, they would read. It's very obscure, but that's what I do here. I like to tank my views. This cup looks unaesthetic. So, Victorian Gothic Romance Literature. It's a tongue twister, I know. Fellow book club members, all 10 of you, listen up. It may surprise you to learn this genre didn't even start in the Victorian era. The 19th century was just when it had its bountiful renaissance, if you will. The Victorian era was when it was the most popular. The seeds of this genre was sown as early as the 1790s with Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho in the 1790s. I have neither read Anne Radcliffe nor can I pronounce Udolpho. Expanding beyond the Victorian age, the 1800s, the 19th century, we go into a mid-century Gothic romance revival. The 1940s, 50s, 60s with Victoria Holt's, the India fan. Then, of course, Mary Stuart, Nine Coaches Waiting, Thorny Wick, The Rose Cottage, Moon Spinners, Madam, Will You Talk? Mary Stuart, by the way, she had a very prolific career of Gothic romance literature. She was most notably famous for her Merlin trilogy, retelling of King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, told from Merlin's point of view. The first book of the trilogy was called The Crystal Cave. I read it in 1998, and this is a little bit of a side, but I vaguely remember Merlin was trained to be a wizard in a crystal cave. I think that's why it's called The Crystal Cave. I'm probably getting this all wrong. I only read it once, so if you who are part of my book club have read this book multiple times, please enlighten me in the comments below. But I remember that there was this crystal cave and Merlin was trained in this crystal cave by an elderly wizard who then beat him with a bamboo stick. Am I mixing it up with Star Wars? Is this the training of Luke and Yoda was beating him upon the head with a stick, with his cane? So for the purposes of this video, we're not going to talk about Gothic romance from the 1790s, and we're not going to talk about Gothic romance from the mid-century. We're going to talk about the cornerstones or the building blocks of a Gothic romance from very famous books that you have probably heard of. If you're in this book club, you have definitely heard of it. So I'm not going to name off these books. I want to keep you on your toes. We're going to play a game of Trivia Pursuit. We're going to talk about it in terms of vibes and talk about some really juicy, salacious topics. So the first one is a very famous book. It's about a young woman who grew up in an orphanage and she seeks independent employment as a governess in a sprawling, tumble-down manor. What is the manor called? Drop it down in the comments below. So she becomes the nanny of a little French girl. The girl is the ward of the master of the house. She meets him on her morning stroll. She startles his horse. I love making horse sounds, and that's something we have to explore later, why I love making animal sounds. She startles his horse, launching him into the air. He breaks his arm, or was it his leg? Let me know. Was it the arm or the leg? He's injured, and he gives her a piece of his mind. He's very brusque with her. He's also, I believe the author describes him as ugly, but handsome, like handsome ugly. So he's rugged, darkly brooding, a Byronic hero. Dark shadows under his eyes, high collar, probably windswept hair. A little devilish, if I may add, but also ugly. And he's always talking about how ugly he is, even though he's not ugly. He's ugly handsome. The main character, she also has self-esteem issues. She's like, I'm so plain. I'm so plain. Look at my face. Ugh, plain. She's like a spark plug. So he gives her a piece of his mind and she gives him a piece of her mind because she thinks he's just like a servant. You have a license to drive this horse? You have a license to ride this horse? He's riding around recklessly. He's probably like drunken horse riding or something. He could have killed somebody. They both have very strong, independent spirits and it's like a hate at first sight kind of relationship. And later on, he asks her to join him by the hearth. There's always a hearth in these books. She realizes that he is the master of the manor and she is in his employ. She's his governess of his ward. Do you guys know what this book is now? They form a friendship based on mutual respect, but also an underlying attraction. And in that time, the main character, she's getting stalked and she suspects it's this husky servant that she sees around is playing mind games with her in this castle, okay? In this manor. It's not a castle, it's a manor. In the interim, during the middle of the night, somebody tries to burn the master of the manor's bed while he's still in bed. Bed burning is what we're talking about here. This is a Lifetime movie special. Remember in the 70s, there was this Lifetime movie called The Bed Burner starring Farrah Fawcett. You know, she had enough and she decided to burn some beds. This is the origin of the bed burning, okay? The two fall in love and he has some secrets that he won't tell her. You know, he has some regrets in his past, some past relationship mistakes. It's okay. They're in love and they're going to get married. Then it turns out, and this is where the juicy part lies. And this is why I love Gothic literature. Because not only do you have ancient ruins and creepy castles with dark, shadowy corners and too many rooms with secret passageways and labyrinths and ghost sightings and windswept moors and dark, Byronic, brooding heroes with tragic pasts and tight breeches, but then you have the cream of the crop. Sinister family secrets and madness that could just tear your relationship apart. In this sense, Gothic romance is a modern day soap opera. So the two characters fall in love, you know, it's kind of like an inappropriate relationship. In the romance novel world, we have all these tropes: enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, sunshine and grump. These are all relationship tropes that I've personally written. I haven't written a friends to lovers. Well, actually I have. Now, this romance here, I think, is a May-December relationship. She's very much younger than he is. There's an age gap. There's many things going on with it. Also, many toxic things going on with it. But this is Gothic romance. You know, it's a celebration of toxic relationships. Not only do we have some enemies to lovers, which I love, I'm all about, but we also have an age gap relationship, a May-December. She's much younger than he is. And also, she's also in his employ. He's her employer. He's diddling the nanny. I mean, nobody gets diddled in this. This is Victorian Gothic romance literature. So let's just keep it classy here. Nobody diddles anybody. Nobody diddles the governess. Nobody diddles the master of the house. But there's the suggestion that people want to diddle each other. So they're engaged. He wants to get married right away. He's kind of like antsy to get her to the altar for some reason. Then it turns out that this guy, this motherfucker, I'm going to bleep that out. He is already married. He has been keeping his wife locked up in the attic. His wife is mad. I mean, she's not like very sane. The madness, that's another cornerstone of Gothic literature. So his wife is crazy and dangerous and violent. And she's been going around burning beds, beating people up, probably beating him up. Instead of like taking her to a Swiss clinic, he locks her up in the attic and hopes to forget about her. Keeps her sedated, you know, while he tries to marry the governess, who is way younger than he is. I love Jane Eyre. It has so much drama. And when you think about it, if it were not for the Gothic trappings, if this didn't take place in a manor, and if Mr. Rochester were not a titled lord, I think he's a titled lord. Is he Lord Rochester? Or he's just Mr. Rochester? Well, he's a man of means. This is like something that would take place in my hometown of Long Beach. There's a story about a friend of a friend. She found out that her boyfriend was cheating on her. She flipped out and she made him get out of her car on the 405, like in the middle of the 405, like a 5-lane highway. And so Jane didn't freak out, but Bertha, Mr. Rochester's wife, she flipped out when she found out that her husband was trying to two-time her with the governess, Jane. So she had a flip out, and I think it's the same kind of flip out as that friend of a friend who threw her cheating boyfriend out of her car in the middle of the freeway. You may think like, man, these bees be crazy, but I have a lot of sympathy for Bertha, the jilted mad wife locked in an attic, because it's not her fault that she's mad. She has mental issues that can't be dealt with in the Victorian age. Instead of taking her to, I don't know, a Swiss clinic somewhere, he decided to sedate her and lock her up in the attic. But Jane, after she found out that her fiance was already married and trying to make her the homewrecker, the other woman. So this is the messiness that comes with getting into an employer-employee relationship where you also live where you work. Now she has no job. She's just wandering around. She's homeless. She's destitute. She's only dressed in a sad gray dress with a shawl, very ill-equipped for the wildness of the moors. Running up that hill and making a deal with God. Run up that hill, make a deal with God. She has a strange voice, doesn't she? And that's another cornerstone of Gothic Gothic romance literature is the running up that hill. The moors is a windswept, wild place for a lot of people to just run around in their nightgowns, scantily dressed. But Jane, she had a sad gray dress and a shawl, and that's all she had. And she's just wandering for days. Also kind of mad too, getting all dehydrated, starving. So then she's discovered by these missionaries. She ends up catching the eye of the bachelor missionary dude. I think his name is John, and he's into her too. So the thing with Jane is that even though it's really spelled out for you how plain she is and how mousy she appears to be, she has that je ne sais quoi. She has riz. Okay, charisma, riz, though she may not know it. She's completely blind to her own riz. And so is Mr. Rochester. In fact, I believe they had a conversation with each other by the hearth about how unattractive they both think they were. And in my imagination, I think they're both hot. Moving on. Wuthering Heights at its heart is about a toxic relationship between two very destructive people. Self-destructive and just like plain destructive. Wasn't there a point where Heathcliff banged his head against a tree? There was some head banging involved, and it's about like hurting each other and marrying other people in order to hurt each other, and then realizing that you just want to be together, you two, soulmates, and also kind of like cellmates. Cathy and Heathcliff, they love each other. They hurt each other. They love each other. Where he leaves her for 3 years and expects her to wait for him. Then she marries somebody else, somebody with a tamer temperament. And then he gets back at her by marrying, I don't know who he married. He married somebody else. He was a very bad husband to her. He just wants to be with Cathy, and Cathy just wants to be with him. If I were your friend, I'd be like, get over this guy. He is not good for you. He's kind of abusive, actually. But you're like, he's hot. He's wild at heart. He's a headbanger. It's about a love that is so wild and destructive, and metaphor as wild and destructive as the moor in which this book was set, just destroys the lives of each other, of both Cathy and Heathcliff, and of the lives of the people that get in their way. Their love is so intense and so passionate, it warrants a bloody headbang against a tree. When they marry other people, like tamer people, these people are like collateral damage against this wild love affair. And God help me, despite its toxicity, despite Heathcliff being kind of like the worst guy ever, Cathy also being like, she's no saint herself. They're like the worst people ever. But I also think like the adolescent girl in me, the 13-year-old girl in me, also thinks it's like the most romantic thing ever. But when I was 13, I may love this toxic love story, but I could distinguish fantasy from reality. And I'm willing to bet a lot of teenage girls can too. Forever and always, there's always been certain people that like to censor things. You got to censor this book, you got to censor that book. They haven't read the book, they just heard through the grapevine that the book is dangerous, it's insightful. Like to mind what women read. Quoting Cal from Titanic, maybe I should mind what she reads from now on. For instance, that's why there's always a lot of moral panic and controversy with spicy book talk romances. This Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, for example, has been enshrouded in controversy about how it romanticizes abuse. There's an intense abusive relationship, but here's the thing, and circling back to Wuthering Heights, one could read about an intense, passionate, tempestuous relationship, but in real life, one is not going to go out and say, I enjoyed that book about a toxic relationship, let me go and get me one of those. Just like buying a Stanley Cup, I want one of those. I want to find a guy that could really slap me around, lead me down the road of destruction. We'll both just end up in prison. We're like Bonnie and Clyde. Like for instance, I love The Phantom of the Opera. I did a video about it. The Phantom and Christine, a classic case of a very toxic relationship. But when the curtains close and music of the night is over, I don't look around in real life and go, hey, that was an abusive relationship. How romantic. I want one of those too. I'm going to find me a guy that can really control every single thing I do, take me by the shoulders and just shake me until my teeth chatters. So when you say Colleen Hoover's This Ends With Us romanticizes abuse, it will influence women, young women, older women, to romanticize abuse and then get themselves into an abusive relationship, then I would just have to ask, how stupid do you think women are? So there's the idea that women have, how do I say it, feeble minds. And more so when you're a teenage girl, you have feeble minds. The thing is, when I was 13 and I read Wuthering Heights, and I read Twilight at 22, indulging in a similar toxic relationship between Bella and Edward, I recognized that it was a fantasy and I could distinguish fantasy from reality. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of teenage girls can also distinguish fantasy from reality. So maybe our minds are not as feeble as you think. A lot of the times, books by women for women, it's kind of like a message in the girls' bathroom about which guys that you should avoid, which guys that you should not date, the bad seeds one needs to avoid, the fox that could potentially get into the hen house, the guy who is already married. Do not get in a relationship with a guy who is already married, especially when he keeps his wife locked up in the attic. Don't get in a relationship with your employer. Don't shit where you eat, meaning if you also live where you work, don't get in a relationship with your employer. Avoid the guy who bangs his head against a tree. I mean, that itself is obvious. No matter how hot he is, if he is hot and he bangs his head against a tree, undateable. When you're outside during the winter, out in the moors, wear a coat. Even my girl Colleen Hoover, she also wrote some stuff on the girls' bathroom wall. That neurosurgeon, he's hot, but he's going to smack you around a bit and you get out of it. Get out of it. So those that wanted to drum up this invisible controversy, where none existed, maybe they're the guys that have their name on the bathroom wall and they don't like that. They want to protect the hens in the hen house from the fox. Except, the reality is perhaps they're the fox that you need to be protected from and they want to keep the hens in the dark. I just find it a little funny, a little suspicious, Funny how? I'll tell you how funny. Why would somebody go around sniffing out perversity, sniffing out degenerates where none is intended, none is found in innocent places unless they in their heart are perverse? They in their heart are degenerates. He who smelt it, dealt it. So speaking of degenerates, if in this segment I happen to give off fiery Bertha the bed burner energy, Bertha Rochester, the bed burner of Jane Eyre, there is a comment that somebody left me, and it's partially my fault for reading it because it was deemed so offensive by YouTube or the YouTube algorithm that they've basically tucked it in a folder within a folder. And you click on it and they're like, are you sure you want to do this to yourself? And I'm like, how bad can it be? So this viewer, anonymous by the way, they're always anonymous, but I'm pretty sure from the tone and the message that it's some guy, and he was very angry with me. He wrote an essay, like a giant block of text. It was basically a manifesto. You know who wrote manifestos? The universe. He was very angry at me for 2 transgressions he cannot get over. And number 1 being, I told a story about when I was 16 years old, I scored the highest in math class on a test. And when it was announced, I was not humble about it. I was arrogant about it. I was cocky about it, and I flipped my hair. And now looking back on it in hindsight, it's an obnoxious thing to do. But am I 16 years old now? Can the crimes of a 16-year-old girl be forgiven? This crime of daring to flip your hair to a male teacher. In his manifesto, I should have been locked up, throw away the key. There's no forgiveness for a 16-year-old girl and her crime. I don't think it's that much of a crime. In his book, it's unforgivable. Just the touch of arrogance in a woman is unforgivable, especially in a minor. I needed to be dragged out to the town square, scarlet letter on my chest, stoned. No trial, straight to the executioner. And the next transgression that he just could not get over. This manifesto is very detailed. You shouldn't be reading Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. That's not good for you. You're like a child. You need to be protected from yourself. A male authority figure in your life should have disciplined you for that. And by discipline, he didn't mean like give me a dressing down, like a talking to. He meant discipline. Girls, Where are my matches? Can somebody lend me a match or just drop some fire emojis in the comments down below and somebody point me toward his bed because this guy's bringing out some bed burning Bertha energy. So I'm going to circle back to the very first novel I ever wrote, which is a Gothic romance novel. I'm not going to show you the novel for privacy reasons in case, the crazy manifesto man decides to write a scathing review of it without reading it. Decides to ban it. So this book is a Gothic romance book set in the modern day, but it contains all the motifs of a Gothic romance. Haunted houses, sinister family secrets, a bit of madness, grave robbing, a bunch of degenerates. I like the word degenerate. A degenerate is a person of low moral character. Maybe that's what I should call my book club. The Degenerate Book Club. It also sounds like a good name for a band, The Degenerates. In any event, the supporting characters are kind of like a nest of vipers, but the main character, instead of falling in a nest of vipers like Indiana Jones, she does fall at some point into a pit of rats. But there is one mistake nobody caught in this entire book. It's not necessarily a mistake, it's just like that's a choice. The main character, she has major daddy issues and she's always trying to gain her father's affection because her father just has never liked her entire life. And then it turns out the reason why her father has never liked her is because he isn't her real father. Her real father is actually her uncle. Her creepy uncle. Her uncle is her father's brother. We're not talking about stepbrothers or half-brothers. They're full-on brothers, but her father is American. The entire family is not British, but her uncle is British. Later on, years later, my husband was like, why is the uncle British? Why does he have to be British? And I'm like, he's just British, okay? I want him to be British, so therefore he's British. It's not unusual, like in The Lion King, Scar, voiced by Jeremy Irons, Scar is British. Nobody's questioned why Simba has a British uncle. So the uncle is kind of like that character from the Alfred Hitchcock movie, Rebecca. I think the actor's name is George Sanders, like very diabolically posh British. Why the British uncle? I don't know why. I just wanted him to be British, okay? It's not like this book is going to win me a Pulitzer Prize or anything. Although it did get me signed with the same agency that represented John Steinbeck and Harper Lee, if you can believe it. Yeah. I know, it's hard to believe. Literary standards have definitely come down, especially when I'm involved. But later on, we were watching The Dark Knight, or was it Dunkirk? It was some Christopher Nolan movie. We also have watched his brother's works like Westworld, this year recently Fallout, Jonathan Nolan. Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan. Christopher Nolan is British, like he speaks with a British accent, but Jonathan Nolan, when we saw interviews with him, he speaks with an American accent. One is British and one is American. So the Nolan family situation kind of makes me feel better about my little mistake about having a British uncle for some reason. Digging deeper, the Nolans have a third brother, and the third brother has an even more colorful past. This is a Newsweek article, fact check. Sometimes life can be stranger than fiction. That appeared to be the case when the internet was made aware of a bizarre rumor circulating that movie director Christopher Nolan's brother was a hitman using the code name Oppenheimer. Unfortunately, in my book, there was not a third uncle who was a hitman because it never got a sequel. But now that I think about it, that's a good idea. So standards have really fallen in the literary world, especially when I'm concerned, especially if I'm involved in it. But standards are still high in my book club. The crazy manifesto man is barred for life. But Bertha the bed burner, she's bringing the chicken wings, and I will provide entertainment in terms of horse noises, my horse impressions. That actually sounds like a dolphin. Oh my god. I thought I was so good at sounding like a horse, but now I realize that my horse sounds like a dolphin. Well, this really sucks. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up so the algorithm could spread the word and our 10-person book club could be 11 people. Think about that. And if you've enjoyed me, then consider subscribing to my channel. And I'll see ya next time.